Okay, I'm going to quickly go over the trade recap, the trade that I took, and the bias that I had. So, first thing I looked at is the weekly time frame, and I noticed yesterday we made this weekly SMT with the previous week high. So right off the bat, that made me pretty bearish. So pretty significant SMT right here. Then I looked at the daily, and we did have, so here's the SMT. We did have an SMT with previous day high as well. So here's previous day high on NQ. You can see it pretty much formed a daily rejection block that we tapped into. Right, so there's a lot of drawings here. Alright. So on the daily time frame, the only thing I really saw that we could get a reaction off of, at least on the daily, is this daily rejection block, right? So we already tapped into it here, and then we had the CE of it here. So this was kind of my draw right off the bat, and then I wanted this low to get swept because it just looked like engineered liquidity for this daily rejection block. This one here is technically a daily rejection block as well, but I didn't really think this was going to hold right because we have this one, the CE of this daily, right below. So this low from Tuesday pretty much became my draw. But on top of that, if you look at the 4 hour, right, there's pretty much nothing to react off of. This 4 hour wick was the daily rejection block as well, but still just want to see this get swept. And then potentially look for longs out of this. If this can get tapped, then we can build good structure off of this. And I also drew like the daily range. So from this low up to this high, it's kind of hard to identify like the actual daily range because it's so choppy, but I just considered this swing low and this swing high as the daily range. And we're still pretty much holding the daily range on the 4 hour. Alright, this hadn't closed yet, but it was pretty clear that we're going to close past OTE on the daily range. And we inversed this tiny little 4 hour gap here. So I really didn't think this wick here was going to hold. It's not really off of anything except for the beginning of this daily rejection block. But yeah, just one CE of that. If you look at ES as well, there's like no gaps on the 4 hour to react off of. All right, we have this big 4 hour, like you could call this a rejection block. I just didn't want to use this really as a rejection block because it didn't really tap into any gaps, right? Like it swept some lows, but I didn't really view it as that good of a rejection block, right? And it was previous day low, so I just want to see this get swept. And then on the 1 hour, right, we inversed this 1 hour gap. Well, I guess we, yeah, we did. So yeah, I didn't really have a reason to be bullish, right? I didn't really see anything to react off of. I pretty much just wanted to see a move higher. Let me get rid of this, and then I wanted to see this 1 hour gap hold and this 1 hour range. So we did have an SMT with previous day low, and we had like a small internal SMT with this little 5-minute low. Right, but I didn't really care about this SMT because like if you look at ES, I just expected this to get swept. It just looked like engineered liquidity for something, right? And then there's no gaps here. We still have all these lows, right? I also considered this low way down here as engineered liquidity because it's kind of above this old new week opening gap. So yeah. And then what I saw is we get, or I put the fib on this 1 hour leg. Same thing on ES. I put the fib on the 1 hour leg. And you can see we swept out a lot of lows. We swept London low, but we weren't really rejecting it because we closed past it on the 1 hour here, right? And if you just look at the 1 hour, like this looks super bearish. There's no good bullish structure. And you can see I pretty much viewed 1800 and midnight opening as an open high manipulation into this 4-hour gap here, holding this and holding this new day opening gap. Right. Same idea on ES. I think we closed past, yeah, we closed past London low. So my draw pretty much became previous day low on ES and then this low on NQ. And then we had these 1 hour gaps, right? We had this 15-minute gap up here. If you look at the 15-minute. So I wanted to see open trade higher and at least hit EQ of this 1 hour leg. We did have this 15-minute gap up here, which would be nice as well. It's also a 30-minute gap, I think. Yeah, so I at least wanted to see EQ of this leg. Let me drop down to the 5-minute. So here's open right here. All right, so you can see we get this huge move higher. If you look at the 1 minute, looks pretty clean. Whoops. Here's 9:30 open. We get this move higher and we tap EQ, or yeah, EQ of this 1 hour leg, fill the 1 hour gap. And if you look at ES as well, we actually hit this more premium 1 hour gap up here. This little one. Oops. Okay. And then we tap into OTE as well. So makes sense. ES didn't sweep this low, so it was a bit stronger. Taps into OTE. And NQ doesn't reach OTE, just taps EQ of the 1 hour range because it's weaker. And I wanted to see a good 3-minute or 5-minute rejection block off this. Right, so we did have a 3-minute, but at the same time that was closing, we had this big 5-minute. So this 5-minute rejection block was huge. But what I did is, right, this looked really good to me. We also did have like a little bit of an SMT with this high, right? So this looked like really obvious to me, and I just want to see this low get swept. But what I did is I limited the beginning of this rejection block, and I scaled down to the 1 minute and pretty much had my stop just above this 1 minute inversion here. So this 1 minute gets inversed, and I just have my stop right around here. Let me get rid of this. And then you can see, so we form a 1 minute low here. Right, so then I drew the fib on this leg. And I actually limited I limited this right here, which is the beginning of the 1 minute inversion. And I pretty much have my stop just covering OTE here. Right, I just want to see the beginning of this 5-minute get tapped and then deliver. I didn't want to see much of a move higher up into it just because, right, we had a lot of volatility at open. And if we're going to come like all the way up into CE of this, I wouldn't really want to see that. And I pretty much just treated 9:30 open here as like 10 a.m. key open. So I pretty much just expected 9:30 open to get tapped and then deliver. So my stop was kind of big, not gonna lie, but it's alright. Just want to cover at least like this 1 minute inversion, OTE, right? And then I targeted this low right here. I'm not sure why I didn't. I should have targeted like this low, but I just targeted this one because these lows were like relative equal lows, which is good draw. And then this delivered pretty quickly. So it got tapped in on this, and then when this candle closed here, I went break even because I did not want to see this little 1 minute rejection block get swept. So I moved my stop here, but originally it was around here, about 35 points. And yeah, let me take this low. So that's what I took. I think it was about a 1 to 3. Yeah, so the stop was a little bit big, but it's all good. I do think I could have held for more. But we did sweep this low that I wanted. So, and then we get a reaction off that. Nice. So, yeah, that's a trade that I took. I took it. It was really close to open. I just took it because for me, it was really obvious. And that's what I like to take. Just whatever looks obvious, whatever looks clear. We're also holding this 5-minute gap, which is nice. Right, so that's what I took. Hope that makes sense. Let me pull up the execution as well so you can see this. Right, here it is. I guess it was like 1 to 2.7. Yep. I guess my stop was 40 points. Right. So maybe I should have held to that low, which is around here. Would be cool, but yeah. Hopefully that makes sense. And I'll see you guys in the next one.